Welcome to Talent Titans, the podcast where we bring you entrepreneurs and leaders from the global staffing industry. I'm your host, Suky Sodhi. Now let's jump right on in and welcome today's Titan. Hi, welcome back to another episode of Talent Titans. Today, I'm chatting with Carolyn Levy, Head of Canada for Randstad Technology. Carolyn, welcome.
Thank you.
For those that don't know you, I've just done a very short intro. Do you want to tell people who you are and what your whole role really actually is?
Yeah, it's a beefy role. It's fun. It's been through a lot of transformation. I've been with Randstad just under 19 years. And right now I'm the Managing Director and Head of Canada for Randstad Digital Americas. Randstad Digital is a new brand that came in just a couple of years ago. And one other role that I did have, which I'm known quite publicly for, is the Chief Diversity Officer role. I started that in 2020. However, when we became Randstad Digital, I actually denounced that role because, as I'm sure we'll get to, I have a fundamental belief that D&I should be embedded within leadership teams. So I just have it embedded into the role that I am in today.
Amazing. So on that note, we're going to dive straight in, and 100% I do want to touch on that as well. So you've been with Randstad 19 years, you said. So you've had a chance to see this industry, both from a bird's eye point of view in your leadership roles and on the ground. How would you describe the current state and what's shifting beneath the surface that we need to pay closer attention to?
So I want to think of this in a couple of angles. And one I love to speak to, which is really the dire importance of our industry. And then, yes, the state of transition. And if we think first on the dire importance to it. So whether everyone in this industry is aware of it or not, we actually provide economic insight a lot earlier than what's reported, right? Hard economic statistics that come out from the government of Canada or in the US, that's reported late. We actually become the pulse of what's going on in the economy. So for example, if you think on bill rates, we've started to see those start to increase, or billed hours, those have started to go down. So those are economic indicators before we actually see anything hit the unemployment rate. And as many organizations across Canada are faced with so much uncertainty, and let me say that the right way, I think that's around the world. The staffing industry is certainly imperative to help keep businesses move or help them really move forward by being able to support flexible labor. So this is incredibly important right now because what's everyone worried about? Cost, either what they've got to pass to a consumer or whatever they're dealing with from an operating cost perspective internally. And everyone's trying to drive efficiency at the same time. So the staffing industries there were extremely important because we can create that connection for organizations to really optimize their cost. But at the same time, we're actually creating access to gainful employment for people as well. So that's really the importance of that. And I think that's something that people really need to be proud of working in this industry. I think we often can sometimes get a negative story or negative press will go out about our industry.
Yep.
But we're really important in understanding what's going on with the economy. And again, that's that pulse of who we are and what we're able to contribute.
Why do you think, I totally agree with you, but why do you think your smaller mid-size don't necessarily pay that much attention of what the data is actually saying? You said billable hours going down. They see it as, yes, our hours are going down, and then they go into that reactive mode rather than take a pause and say, okay, what does this mean? Is this just a blip? I.e., has a client, orders gone down, something happened there? Or is this something happening on a larger scale? Why do you think your smaller mid-sized independents don't necessarily start looking at that data early enough?
So let me respond to that question I'm coming from a large organization, right? Which is, I really think of people working in these big companies like intrapreneurs. They kind of de-risk themselves because they can screw up and the doors don't close, right? It's like you can, versus an entrepreneur. So maybe I'll put it that way. And I've not been an entrepreneur. I've been in this business like almost 2 decades, right? With the same company. So here's my assumption of what could be happening is because the staffing industry is so naturally reactionary. I think most people that are in there are used to that quick twitch, high win, let's move. And being able to take the step back, they may not feel that they actually are afforded the time to do it. So it's what's the loss that I'm going to experience if I'm trying to take a step back? And is it too much risk for me to lose elsewhere if I'm not getting that opportunity to step back? I think bigger organizations are more intentional about that because they can foster the time. Losing a few clients isn't going to close the door, right? Like I'm trying to go as bare minimum as I
Yep.
can. But the other aspect too is I think that's one of those foundational shifts that are happening. Our industry can shift from being reactionary to being proactive. You can be proactive to what's coming, right? Like it could be, the normal cycle of what your clients are dealing with or what's going on within the economy in normal cycles. So how do you actually build in a schedule if you're in a smaller medium firm to say, when are we doing these points to step back and look at the economic indicators, right? So I think it would be really valuable if small and medium firms did start to do that, because you could course correct a lot earlier than what you might be able to, instead of getting, stuck in the honey and be like, oh my goodness, how do I get out of this, versus let's not take that path. Let's go in this direction. So it's hard for me to answer just because I'm coming from the outside, but I hope that perspective is
No.
helpful.
I totally hear where you're coming from. And I think the other part of it also is when you're with a quote unquote larger organization, there is somebody available to go and quote unquote do that legwork
Yeah.
for you. Go and say, go and pull this report, that report. So by the time you as a leader are looking at it, you've got the research is there, the data is there for you to then make an informed opinion.
Yeah.
Smaller company, they've got to go and do that themselves.
Yeah.
And the truth of the matter is, a lot of smaller independents spend so much time working in the business as opposed to on the business.
You're true.
So
Yeah.
anybody that's in my forum or has ever had coaching with me, I always say to them, it doesn't matter how big you are or how small you are for that matter, you got to allocate time to work on that business. And that's when you do this kind of stuff.
Yeah. And I think you're an interesting angle for that, that I'd love to introduce the concept of mentorship, sponsorship, and
Yep.
coaching. Like, I think it was Michelle Obama that said the strongest shape in nature is a triangle. And I wholeheartedly believe in that. So it's like, put yourself in the center of that triangle.
Yep.
You're a small business and you don't have the access to all the resources that are going to do that analysis for you. Have a mentor, have someone that's a sponsor, like helping you continue to move up and grow your business, and then work with a coach so you can kind of tie everything together. They'll force you to take a step back by just making time for them.
Yeah. Because sometimes we do, and it doesn't matter whether you're in a small company, large company, you're so busy in it. You're
Yeah.
in that middle of that quote unquote storm at times. And you
Yeah.
just need somebody to just say, there's an exit coming up, right? Are you going to take it or not?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so let's talk about. So you've been in this industry 20 odd years.
Yeah.
At this point in your career, what's truths about our staffing industry do we need to say out loud? So what do I mean with that? There's some things that we need to acknowledge as an industry, but we kind of don't because we don't want to deal with that uncomfortable truth. In your opinion, what is some of that stuff that we actually should be talking about out loud?
Oof, there's a lot. And I think this links a little bit back actually to your first question before I go further into that, is the part around what is the industry, like what's happening right now. There's a piece that's around transition. And I think that that's what we've got to be real with to start, right? That every organization right now is looking to partner in a very different way than what they've done in the past. And we're seeing it heavily here. So when we're looking at trends that are going on, statement of work is a big piece that's coming into a transactional business, right? And if we're looking with small, medium firms who are used to the transactional business, companies are now saying, we want you to step up and come to the table to problem solve with us on our talent strategy, as opposed to just deliver to it once we've got it set, right? So I think understanding that a transition is happening and buyers are changing, the world is really changing. You look into the US, 4 million people are exiting, aging out of the workforce. Only 1 million are coming in, and our birth rate is decreasing. So like, should we be afraid of technology like AI and automation? Not at all, because we literally do not have enough people in the future to drive economic sustainability as it sits. So I think that's one of the first areas that we should just hard stat look at, that the industry is in a transition. Don't be afraid of it. Just understand, how do you need to show up within it? And a big piece is going to your clients and talking to them about what problems that they're having, right? As opposed to looking to that any different. if we go down things that we've got to kind of call out, we've got that role in economic prosperity, and I think we cross every industry. Like, what an interesting industry we sit in. We know what's going on in every industry, going back to that, we're the pulse of the economy, right?
Yep.
So we need to ensure that we step in, especially at this point in time, on inclusive hiring practices, right? Intentionally work to connect underrepresented communities that are in the workforce and forge paths for them. And then on the same side, stepping up with organizations who are hiring and really work to make these connections. That's how everyone's going to win. So if I say to myself, or someone's asking me a question, Carolyn, how do we actually do that? There are many small but incredibly impactful, I think, questions and decisions that people working within our industry can ask and they can make. So in this day and age, it's still, oh my goodness, unbelievably difficult. Yeah, let's say it this way: you have to have a lot of courage to ask good questions and speak up when you see forms of discrimination happening. And our industry sees discrimination nonstop, right? It's like, don't settle for a request from someone that makes your gut feel uncomfortable, right? We've got to be more vocal about that. We're not just delivering as a vendor to anything that anyone asks and only focused on the commission that comes from getting the person into that role. That's that part of taking a step back and saying, where are we being curious and asking questions when we feel uncomfortable? So instead of just swallowing it, make sure we step into it. And then the other aspect is to ensure, as businesses and staffing, that we're offering training, right? It's that stuff have we sat down and said, this is how you do inclusive hiring. It's okay to stand up. It's okay to risk the revenue if there's discrimination happening, right? In Randstad, we created a D&I division to be subject matter experts internally and then be able to give services to our client. But I really think in that ecosystem, as we move forward, we need everybody. Look at the landscape of people in North America. We cannot work with opportunities in one demographic of those people. We need everybody to be able to show up for economic prosperity. And I think businesses and staffing just need to take that more serious now as we go forward.
Yeah, the statement of work at the Canadian Staffing Summit, that was a huge topic as one of the shifts, one of the changes that are happening.
Yeah.
So you've actually led me nicely into my next question. When we talk about economic prosperity, we often frame it in terms of growth, dollars and cents, that type of thing. But what does equitable prosperity actually look like for our industry? And who is still being left out of the narrative? Now, you slightly touched on it, but I want to elaborate on it a little bit further. So, what does equitable prosperity actually look like, and who's being left out of the narrative?
Yeah. So equitable prosperity. So I think one of the important things to go back to here is definitions for a minute, because a lot of people confuse equity with equitable, or with, sorry, not equitable, I apologize, equity with equality.
Yep.
Right. And then there's also justice that plays a role. And the best visual I can give, because I'm such a visual person, I find it easier versus listening to be on a visual perspective. But if you have the little picture of the people watching a baseball game behind a fence, and they're all standing on the other side of the fence trying to watch the game, there's 3 different sizes of people. So shorter person, a medium height, and a very tall person. And you talk about equality. That means you're going to give all those 3 people to look over this 6-foot fence, like let's say a 5-foot, 5'5", and a 6'5" person. You give everybody, a 2-foot box, right? Or a half a foot box. Sorry, let's think their heights properly there. So if we're putting a little box, what will happen is the person who is the shortest still can't see. The middle person might be able to see if they're going up and down on their toes, and the taller person just still has the same view.
Better view.
No different.
Yeah.
Then that's equality. You're giving everyone the same thing. And here's the difference with equity is you're meeting people where they are. It's not about giving someone a false advantage because they need something more than someone else does, but it's to give everybody the same opportunity for the outcome. So if you're 5 feet tall and it's a 6-foot fence, right, you need a 1.1 foot height box so you can see over properly. If you're 5'5" and you're trying to get to the 6 foot, maybe you need a 0.6. If you're already 6'5", you don't need a box. Right? So I think we need more companies and organizations to figure out, how do I meet people where they are to support them? And then when we think of an equitable future here, and equitable prosperity is that there's a shift for everyone that influences the workforce, in my opinion. So you're looking at government, you look at private businesses, you look at educational institutions, and you look at community groups, right? Those four pillars in our economy don't actually work well together. And I'll give you an example, actually, out of Calgary. One of our universities, for example, has a upskilling program in technology. In the market, they need to ensure that there are 10 people that are graduating from that program with experience to be able to fill the needs in the workplace market or in the job market now. What's happening is they don't have enough funding. They're only able to accept 3. They're getting like 50 applications and get a couple people through or they accept 10 and 3 graduate. I can't remember the exact stats, but I hope you understand where I'm going with this. They don't have enough funding to be able to get enough people to the workforce with that experience. But then you go to the workforce and they're saying, you cannot get this job unless you have that certificate, right? So it's like, where's the gap in how could we do this differently? For example, instead of saying, oh, these are junior positions, we need people to have 5 years experience. Well, where are people getting the 5 years experience from if they can't get in because there's not enough funding to get the education that they need? And then we make it a requirement on the business side that you have to have it and say that we're inclusively hiring. So it's this shift that needs to happen between those groups to help with an equitable future. But it's going to take a lot of courage for people to take a step back and say, how do we actually change? Like the education institution's got to change quite a bit. Businesses need to change quite a bit. We're going to have to train and develop people in the roles that they have instead of saying, come with 10 years experience. It's come with all the soft skills that we need or that you need and show that you're able to grow in a learning environment, that you have a growth mindset, that you're not afraid to fail. We need that versus all these people coming with these hardcore skills to start with.
Why do you think employers, companies are not doing that? Why, to use your word, courage, why don't they have the courage to step up?
Yeah. You know what I think in this day and age, and there's a few books that relate directly to this. No one wants to be the one that's responsible for a decision that doesn't work.
Yeah, fair point.
Mm-hmm. So it's like, for everyone in this industry right now, if you've got any business that's stalling, think about the person that's sitting there. Something's probably happened to them, that they took a decision, it didn't work out, or there's 8 people that are supposed to be involved in a decision. We all know there's so many more decision makers now than what there used to be, right? And especially with how anybody's buying, no one wants to be solely responsible for making a mistake. And I think it's more relevant now than ever because that unfortunate, we see D&I going backwards, right? People are not comfortable. Like a survey that we did on our Work Monitor report showed more people now, over 70% of people in the workforce who were surveyed are hiding themselves. So there's not a lot of courage.
Hiding themselves in terms of making decisions or going for promotions and things like that?
It's hiding who their real self is. So not being able to show up authentically. And here's the catch to how you just said that. If you're not showing up authentically, then you're likely not empowered to do the things that you need to do to get your business done, to get your job done, right? And if you're sitting in your seat and not feeling comfortable as yourself, your ability to make decisions goes down, right? You want people that are comfortable, that will be brave to take the decisions that need to happen. Others, if they're not comfortable, won't risk it. It's more important that they're sitting there in their work as opposed to making decisions.
Is it not also, no, this is not my area of expertise, right? So I could be completely off base here. But I'm looking at it more from a practical standpoint. You want to bring in other employees, you want to bring in people that have the soft skills, but not the technical skills, right? You want to get that done. Great, fine. Then it adds a cost to the business. So suddenly it becomes expensive. So now that decision is now costing the business even more.
Yeah.
Okay, which then hits the bottom line, which then gets me quote unquote told off, or my shareholders are unhappy, or whoever, because I made this massive investment and we may not see an ROI for that for a couple of years, or at least maybe a year or something. So I think, and now I could be, as I said, I could be completely off base here, but do you see that in some cases, or is it really no, just fear of making that decision, being the one that makes the decision that doesn't.
Yeah, I think that's inclusive of it. So if you're
Okay.
making the decision, you're going to cost the company a ton of money, but what if it doesn't work and you don't think you have a strong enough ROI, right? That it's like there's so much uncertainty, I don't think that it's going to give back. But here's the thing in this. There's a way to do this. So think of the flexibility, even if we're servicing our industry or if you're trying to service yourself, what is that combination of the technology needed to support driving productivity? What then is, looking at the workforce, where do you have an aging workforce that could do internal training on a more junior workforce? So take the concept of the SOW, put them together so that they're working together all the time in actually a niche environment and learning on the job together. That's either at a client where it's actual, if I'm using the digital side of things for a moment, full technology and understanding what's going on so that they learn from each other in a pod. So they're still working together. They're just working with senior people and junior people to make it happen and dividing tasks. And we all know that there's enough that's in there that could divide amongst it. Using the right technology to accelerate their performance, then you're shifting a bit as to where your operating expenses actually sit. So that pulls in hybrid work arrangements.
Yep.
Right? So some companies, I'm seeing twofold. Either they're like, you got to come back in 5 days a week. This is what it means. Our culture is that. And depending what organizations are doing, you do need that. But in some cases, it's like, where can you change your facility strategy to create spaces for meaningful connection, to bring people together, but then fund some of that money to go back into what do we need to do to upskill? What do we need to do to invest in the right technology so that we're effective and efficient? And Suky, this is this piece where people have to take a sidestep or a step back and look at that economic landscape. Because if you keep your head down and you keep thinking, if I just old school sales calls all the time, you're going to be left in the dust before you know it. It's like that. It's like all of a sudden it's going to hit you when you just didn't realize it was happening. And I use the example of a tide. So, the tide goes in, the tide goes out. When the tide goes out, don't rush to move your beach chair to get close to the water, because you got to be looking at what's happening in the horizon. You want to be making sure that you're staying back and making better decisions from that perspective so you don't get stuck under the waves.
That takes me into my next questions. Many leaders in the staffing industry want to believe they're moving the needle on DEI. Okay. Well, read the papers. There's so much being said about it on all extremes and all ends, right?
Yeah.
But intent doesn't always equal impact, as we know. What have you seen that actually works? And what is performance noise? And when I mean performance noise, I'm talking in some cases where you have companies that externally just go and look on their LinkedIn page, right? They're advocates of DEI, they're this, they're that. Yet when you actually peel back and you go into the branch or you start the hiring process or something, and you're just like, that the two contradict. So going back, what have you actually seen that actually is working in this day and age? Because for me, the whole DEI conversation over the last 4-5 years, it started off and everybody was in on it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Everyone was like, yes, let's do this. We got to do this. And now, personally, I think in some companies executed it wrong. But now it's like, whoa. So what are you seeing that actually is working?
Yeah, I think, you call this out, and it's such an interesting area to understand. And a lot got cut because you saw D&I responsibilities sit in HR departments as a project.
Okay, yeah, fair
And I think
point.
a lot of projects came out. And guess what happens in times of uncertainty? Projects get canceled. What gets canceled? I remember looking online and seeing when everything started exploding, we need people with 10 years of experience in D&I. And I'm like, where are those people? There's some, but all the practitioners that are there that are like, we do not have that amount of people that can do it. And it was like this race to hire these D&I specialists and then come in and fix everything. Like, what a mandate. Then all you would hear from D&I practitioners is, I'm burnt out. And then ask them, what do you do with your day-to-day? What are you doing? Well, 50% of the time, I'm trying to get executive buy-in. Executive buy-in. Like, I'm hinting at this intentionally, but it's like 50% of your time you're just trying to get your executives to believe that what you should do. Okay, like if we could change that, where could
That
we
should have
go?
been a conversation before the person joined.
Exactly,
Right?
right? But so it was, wow, we're so needed. And then you saw this complete flush of people. We've closed the division. We're not focusing on them anymore. You saw horrific public comments coming out in North America. Like, how embarrassing. Like, D&I exists because of really crappy past of experiences. It's not about having fun and everybody connecting. It is really bad things that have happened to people for no reason, right? That just because of something they can't control, the color of their skin, their religion, their age, just something that they can't control, right? So I think if we put that perspective in here first, I think an interesting point is it's made the headlines, right? For really interesting reasons in the beginning that were supposed to be positive, that when we all realized that's just a lot of checkboxes that started happening. And then it's also getting in there for the wrong reasons. So here's the way that I like to think about it that I think would be very helpful for everyone is instead of trying to push this terminology that's under so much scrutiny, like think diversity, inclusion, equity. It's almost like as soon as you say DEI and A, like that's diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. As soon as you're starting to say those words now, already people are like,
Yeah.
right? And it doesn't matter who it is. If you're a marginalized individual, if you're not, it's kind of, oh God, I don't want to boil the ocean here. This is feeling very heavy for me. So instead of focusing on those words, let's just focus on the outcome. Let's use different words. A sense of belonging, comfort, innovation, performance, productivity, empowerment, retention, attraction. Those are huge things in our industry. Engagement. All of those outcomes. How do we actually get there? We need to be really specific on how we help people feel seen, feel valued, and feel heard, right? Like what a gift it would be if everyone was able to come to work and show up as their real self, because then they could choose to be empowered to be their best, right? You can't tell someone that they are empowered. You have to create the conditions so that they can actually say, I feel empowered,
Yeah.
right? And an
Don't
empowered
tell me, show
workforce,
me.
right? Well, think how powerful that is. That's when you see top performance. You achieve new milestones that really previously probably would be assumed to be impossible. So my point in all of this is organizations have got to shift their thinking that it's not, as we said, stuck in the CSR or like the marketing area and HR departments, but that it's truly threaded straight through the executive team and then woven everywhere. So truly embedded. We need CEOs, we need presidents to create the space on the executive team to prioritize those needs. And what I mean by that is leaders are always used to more peas coming on their plate with no one ever taking them off. She's like, oh, you'll figure it out. It's like, don't put more peas on the plate, create space, don't add to it so that everybody's actually able to do it. And look at it like your P&L, the profit and loss reports. You've got your revenue, you've got your gross product or gross profit, you've got your OPEX, you've got your EBITDA. Put what you're trying to achieve to have a great empowered workforce as focused as you do on your profit, right? The conversations you have to have with your stakeholders or investors, you need your people. Culture eats strategy every day. That's a universal statement that we've all, like, it's a business principle, right? And again, as we've said a couple of times, we need everyone in North America for economic sustainability. And our industry has to figure that out. And we have to be able to see people for who they are and the value they bring and respect all the differences so we can be innovative and not get stuck in groupthink. Like, can you imagine companies that don't have a lot of diversity right now trying to manage what's going on and think about where do we go in the future? I bet there's a lot of boardrooms having closed door conversations. And if everybody's the same in there, they're having a hard time trying to figure out what to do. And hopefully going out and getting different opinions, diverse teams are likely going to have better outcomes.
See, I think I don't disagree with anything you've said there, but I think just looking at it, and I'm by no means an expert in DI, nor do I claim to be, but just looking at it and looking back, absolutely needed. But what happened was or certainly I'll just bring it to myself, one of the issues I had with it, everybody was a DEI consultant, and commanding whatever salary and what have you. And I remember thinking, how can we suddenly have all of these DEI experts come out? Just put DEI expert, advocate, whatever you want to call it, in your LinkedIn profile. That kind of just got they all came out, and I reckon some of them did not know what they were doing. So that
Mm-hmm.
led to the current stigma, bad taste, whatever you want to call it, around DEI. And then again, I'm only going to speak from my perspective, what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing. A lot of people got left out of that conversation, right? So people were brought in, certain people were left out.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking, you can't solve a problem without having all parties around the table. So I think just looking, and I'll just speak for the staffing industry, when I'm talking to companies, there's this fear of making a mistake now,
Yeah.
right? There's this fear of making a mistake. Social media is going to kill you if you make a mistake. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't, type of thing. So it's really interesting because I truly believe people want that equality. They want people to feel empowered. But I think the label has just got such a, what's the word I'm looking for? The DEI label has just got so tarnished that those individuals that genuinely did do really good work for their organizations or the companies they were consulting with, they like everything. Nobody's talking about them. Everyone's talking about the negative experiences.
Yeah, no, and which is unfortunate. And I think it's, like anything, to go to your first point, there's always going to be bad apples, meaning
Yeah.
people will take advantage of things in every role. It doesn't matter what we saw. This fraud that was starting to happen, right? Was we were going through COVID. You can imagine everybody working remote and they were not the person doing the work. They were sharing their screen and somebody else was doing the work. Like we've seen lots of strange things happen. And I think everybody falls victim to that. And again, if we go to that, getting rid of the label and thinking about the outcome. That needs to happen in companies. But when, to your point, when you're actually listed as a D&I consultant, like, well, how can you get out of the label? Because that's actually what it is. And now it's causing all this concern. And it's actually interesting. And you're thinking about, I think about nonprofit organizations who are
Yep.
concerned around funding, right? Like, how do we continue to do this? Should we be more generic? Do we lose the identity that's there? I think we're in a big state of flux there. And my only hope in this is that, D&I consultants and anyone working in that space that understand how to translate it too. And if you're talking to them, they know how to talk to you about what the outcome is and position it. They just might need to be stronger at that positioning instead of leading with it to say, what are they? I want to get an empowered workforce consultant as an example. I don't know what language to use in that aspect, but I certainly think it's an unfortunate reality and a pivot in society that we have to be so concerned there. And that group of people that have the wealth of knowledge and experience, they need to be at the table to people that don't have that experience, right? So I hope more companies will take that time to invest in it, and we forge a new path forward for those people that are very traditionally educated in D&I.
Do you think, and maybe you just want to speak for Canada on this, or North America, depending on where your visibility on this part is, do you think we're moving away from DEI, or is that just noise? And
I think it's noise. I think it's because it's okay. So let's put the North American scenario here. We are dealing with tariffs. I didn't want to say tariffs, but we all
yep,
are, right? So we're
yep,
dealing with the what does that even mean right now? And holy cow, how are we here? And I try to make humor to it, being like, this will be a good business book in the next decade that our kids are going to learn through. It's nerve wracking, I think, with what's going on. But when you talk to businesses directly, you talk to people, it's important. It's just what's getting pushed out doesn't appear to have it. And some people with huge power are unfortunately saying things which are making it feel like it's disappearing. And you're seeing some scared reactions to it, in my opinion, but it might be an upfront external, no, we're not focusing on it. But then when you look again on what's going on actually within the organization, they've just stopped saying it, but they're still doing things to attract people, retain people, give, how do we get pensions out to people? How do we, improve our maternity leave? How do we support women differently? How do we support different holidays? And instead of it just being stats that are in Canada, for example, how can we create more flexibility? That you've got the hybrid work experience. So when you go and you talk to what companies are doing, it's there. There's just fear on how it's projected externally that I've seen. And then some companies have stepped in, right? Like Randstad Digital this year leaned into where we were doing sponsorships before to help ensure that things were happening. by instead of funding a lot of people, we've narrowed it down so that we're funding in a few areas, but more intentionally and heavily to help really move the needle forward. So I think it's there, and I think it would become very dangerous if we do start to say publicly like it's gone, because then someone's going to pick that up and make it into something it's not, So I think we need to keep stepping up and leaning in and explaining, and let's even use the terminology of storytelling, right?
Yep.
How can we have more storytelling happening by diverse people talking about their experiences? That might help us ride this wave so that it gets back to a universally accepted level of importance by the media and by companies.
Yeah, you're right. And it's that execution, because there are many, many companies that have come out and said, yes, these are my words, abandoning our DEI strategy. But for them to abandon that, that means all the people they hired no longer fit into their business model. So those people theoretically should now be on the market, and they're not. We're not necessarily seeing that.
No.
So it's really interesting that you say it's that. But again, that's not authentic, which takes a conversation just down a whole new road. But I know we're coming up to time. There's a couple of things I do want to ask you though. As an industry, okay, we're salespeople, and you said something earlier. We're always in that now moment, right? We're always very reactive and things like that. How do you personally reconcile the tension between driving performance and protecting the people?
Okay, so let me think about this, because the way I want to respond to you here is on the topic of accountability. Like,
Yep.
accountability is one of my favorite things. I grew up, if you remember Danier Leather, do you remember that company back in the day? So I
Yep.
was a manager there while I was going to school,
Got a couple
and
of their jackets.
there we go. I still have
Yep.
lots. My house used to smell like a leather factory. But anyways, we had to wear leather every single day. But I worked with someone who was a mentor of mine forever, and it was around data all the time. She kept coming back and talking to data because, one, go back to this inclusion piece. Data is not discriminatory, right? Like, it's
Yep.
data's data. So this concept of accountability, I think, is so important to the backbone of our success in any industry and anywhere. And it's that what gets measured gets done. That's not my quote. That's just what it is.
Yep.
Measurement's the key to accountability. And accountability should not be a scary word, ever. It's not, like we said, it's not micromanagement. It doesn't mean micromanagement at all. What it does mean is that we have a clear plan. We have a clear path. We know where we're going. We have marked milestones that are along the way. If you've got an opportunity to celebrate, there's that milestone. You celebrate, you continue if it's going well. The next milestone, maybe you celebrate and you've got a course correct. But a key there, what I'm saying is that you're celebrating, right?
Yep.
You celebrate learning. Learning doesn't mean that it's positive all the time, right? Or that it's, no, let me say it this way. Learning doesn't mean it's always a net gain in a financial advantage, right? But it is a net gain from a development perspective, right? So when we're
Good point.
thinking, I learned through the negative experiences. I think we all learned that growing up. It's like, failure is your best lesson. And I'm like, oh, second place is the first loser. I hate
Yep.
failing, but my goodness, is it ever a learning environment? But we want to create those learning environments and ensure that we have accountability, we have those pathways, and we're going to celebrate the whole way along. And I think the other thing to put on the table here is around change, right? Whether good or bad, it's different. Humans are creatures of habit. They like to feel comfortable. They don't naturally do well with change, even if it's really positive. So to what we need to do, that empathy piece, right? And how to get yourself to understand empathy better actually in the workplace, which is surprisingly, it's not as comfortable for a lot of people, but it is an important leadership trait of the future by all means. And we've gone from the golden rule and you got to move to the platinum rule, right? The golden rule is treat others how you want to be treated. Platinum rule is treat others how they would like to be treated. And if you constantly think that way, like, I want to be treated this way, well, Suky, you may not have any interest in how I want to be treated, right? But how do I take the time to be curious and understand how to treat you the way you need to be treated? And then how do I hold you accountable on that journey? I think those are two angles that are incredibly important.
There's a lot of pressure on leadership these days, right? And I think you just nailed it. As a leader, as you were saying that, I was thinking, okay, she's got 10 people and they've got 5 different ways that they want to be led. So now, as a leader, you're having to, and we often forget how difficult it is for a leader to be able to implement all of that because they
Mm-hmm.
themselves are still learning.
Yeah.
Because in the past, it was like, okay, everybody gets quote unquote managed the same way because then that's not discrimination, right? Nobody could accuse them. Well, that person doesn't have to do that. Why do I have to do it? So it was everybody managing everybody the same way. And now we're going to, so I can see why it's hard for some leaders. I get it. Right. So we got to cut some of those leaders some slack as well. But I hear you. I like your platinum rule, manage people how they want. No, what was it you said? Say that one more time.
You want to treat people the way that they would like to be treated, as
They would be
opposed to
like to
treat.
be
Yeah.
treated.
But
Yep.
that's the piece, end with accountability, right? And I think you're calling out such an important piece here, that leadership now is hard. It is not for
It is
everybody.
hard.
And I think any leader that listens to this, like, pat yourself on the back for where you're at. But at the same point, you've got to lead with a core value of to serve. If no one is interested in following you, you're not a leader, right? And it's when we think about how to do this together, it's being at the bottom of a hierarchy, right? The leadership, the CEO should be here and the rest of the organization up top. You don't want to have this traditional hierarchy that existed because there was no platforms for communication, right? That's why there was one person, two people, and then it keeps going out.
Yep.
Now we've got all these platforms for communication. You don't need that. But if we stay through everything really with what I would call as heads up leadership, you're curious, you're clear, you're connected, and you're communicating. So curiosity, clarity, connection, and communication, that's going to help you navigate anything that's going on and stay connected. And in all of that, that's where D&I is all embedded in that. We didn't say anything around D&I, equity, inclusion, anything, but curiosity, clarity, connection, and communication. You nail those areas, that's going to support everybody and help us go through whatever uncertainty is here in the future. And to the point of what we've talked about a lot today, creating that prosperous economic future for everybody.
Yeah. I've got one final question for you. Let's look at crystal ball. If the staffing industry is truly to evolve into a force of systematic change, what is a one that uplifts talents, champions inclusion, drives sustainable prosperity? What fundamental foundational beliefs do we have to let go of? What's the stuff that don't serve us anymore, but we still kind of hold on to it?
Yeah. Well, this is going back a ways, but the workforce is for everyone. I think a foundational belief you in the staffing industry, and I don't know how everybody categorizes it, but sometimes you've heard terminology like this is an A candidate, a B candidate, a C
Yep.
candidate. We got to get labels like that out of there if they exist. They do not exist where I am, but they can't. But there's the mentality of that are we finding you the best fit, or is it the right opportunity for the person? Have you practiced enough curiosity? Have you asked enough questions to get enough, go to those 4 C's again. You've got to ask enough questions so that you get enough clarity to make the right connection. And then how do you communicate to do that? I think we've really got to make sure that we help support environments at our clients and in our own organizations to create space for everyone. And the thing I know some people will think hearing that is like, well, we've got to lower our standards. Like I heard that a lot when you saw a lot of D&I initiatives come in. It's like, what? You are doing this the wrong way if you think this is lowering a standard. But it's, where are there accommodations needed? Where do we practice equality and equity if we bring those terms back in? Where do we meet people where they are so that we can actually thrive together? So I think that is an age-old thing that's got to change, is that the workplace is for everyone, and we need to do better to step up to see how we do that. And especially because there's not enough people coming. Our immigration is slowed down. We do not have a great birth rate. Like everything is declining. So if we can't figure that out, we've got a problem. And that's where the staffing industry is going to be able to step up and really do it. And I think the other aspect, it just even offering a word of advice here is, in our industry, we got to focus and we got to specialize. Generalists have got to go. Like it's don't be a generalist anymore. They're looking for support. And even if you have been, it's like, okay, let's look and be like, where are we good at? What does your data tell that you've done a really good job at? Why don't you campaign to that and narrow it so that you can accelerate it? But that would take courage of saying like, but we've always done everything and that brought in revenue a bit on this side and then it brought it in on this side. But I would really encourage everyone to start to specialize so that we're able to forge really great paths as an industry as a whole, instead of from a generalist perspective.
Yeah, the generalist, the fear is, oh well, another competitor gets in. That's
Right.
fine. You own your space. Anyone that knows me knows I believe in dominating a niche, right?
Yeah.
So whatever
Yeah.
that niche might be. But I do agree with you on that one. And the only other piece I would add as you were talking is the aged workforce,
Mhm.
right? They've
Yeah.
got a lot to offer. There was a time where anybody, like if I was to go out on the market today, I'm too old, right? I'd fall into that too old category. Um, and there's a lot of talent sitting there that has been laid off, like that late 50s, late 40s, that age. They've got so much to offer. We as an industry need to start looking at that talent pool as well and
Yeah.
advocating for them, because we, going back to something you said earlier, every time we think of DEI, we're always thinking gender and all of those things, right?
Mhm.
And but that ageism that
Yeah.
happened, we've gone, in my personal opinion, we've got so far the other way that there's some really amazing talent on the market
100%.
who are later stage of their career. Maybe they've only got 5 years left, 5 years
Yeah.
before they retire, but they could offer so much to companies in those 5 years.
I know. And Suki, actually what you said, we need to help as a society. We need to step and help more people, like how you just said for yourself, right? Oh, I'm too old to go on the market, but I want to make a difference to help it. We need that to change, that
Yeah,
there isn't about being too old. You have different experiences that are coming in. We need that workforce. And again, that's about how do we meet people where they are and engage in a different way than a 40-hour work week or a 37.5-hour work week. How do we set it up differently for those people to engage the way that they can so they can contribute, right? There's so
yeah.
many amazing things. And actually in Calgary, I'm based out of Calgary right now, there's an initiative called 7 over 70s, and I love this. I'm involved with trying to get it out to the community, but the point is it's a whole recognition program every year for 7 individuals over the age of 70 that have started something new. So not that
Oh
they
wow.
came from being a CEO and then did other things. It's really what have they done to give back to the community since they were being over the age of 70 and do something new. So an example is like one woman started a soccer team in Calgary. Like there's just another woman in her 80s started a technology company. It's
Wow.
incredible what they've done. And we've got to really focus on that. And I think companies, we always talk about mentorship programs. Let's make sure mentorship has reverse mentorship in it. That
Yep.
who right now are you working with that's in their 80s that could give you an idea, or that's in their 50s that can give you a perspective, right? And same point is to go back and get the perspective from someone that's in their 20s just coming into their workforce. So we have to think broader, because this is the most demographics of people we've had in the workforce in any given time, right? For how many are contributing right now. So I think age is starting to go up. People are living longer, right? Especially now, people are understanding more about their health. We're trying to get more into preventative healthcare. It's so important. And the wisdom that they're carrying is just incredible. So yeah, I hope we can have everybody say, have no fear in changing a role in my 50s.
Yeah, that's a brilliant note to end on. Carolyn, thank you ever so much for your time. Somebody listening to this and they want to reach out to you and talk further on this, what's the best way for them to get hold of you?
Of course, you can reach out on LinkedIn. I'm on there nonstop. It's a wonderful communication platform. I would give you my email. My email is just where things go to die. So I actually suggest that you go on LinkedIn and send me a note. I'm happy to. It's under Carolyn Levy, and I'd be happy to connect further.
Amazing. Thank you ever so much for your time. I really appreciate this.
My pleasure. Thanks for the
Take care.
discussion.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Talent Titans, brought to you by Recruitment Professional Forum, where they're building a grassroots community for professionals and leaders in the recruitment industry to collaborate, advocate, and advance the profession. If you liked or were inspired by what you heard, make sure to follow, subscribe, and even leave a review. It lets more talented recruiters like you find the show. Until next time, keep on being a talent titan.